All right, what is up, everybody? I know things look a little bit different today. My apologies for the crappy camera here. My nice, expensive, fancy camera is giving me all sorts of troubles right now. So, unfortunately, I do not have that at my disposal tonight, but I'm not going to let that stop me from bringing you a live show. So, hope the audio's okay. Hope you can live with just a dumb angle of me, a much worse looking angle of me. And I know it's late, but I had to wait for these college football playoff rankings to come out tonight, right? So we just got them wading through a basketball game in order to do so, which, if you've been following me on Twitter tonight, is very frustrating to me because I don't know why we're starting college basketball season this early. It's hard to get into. I can't really get into it, and it made me wait an extra hour for these playoff rankings, and I got to wake up early, as I would imagine many of you all do. Those of us that now work in the corporate world, right? We have to wake up early. Anyway, the rankings. We're going to get to that. Cincinnati, I'm calling it still being held down by the committee, even though they were bumped up a spot. And I'm going to explain that because I don't think it has nearly as much to do with Cincinnati specifically this week as it did last week. But I'll hit on that point. Oklahoma is just being criminally underrated. What we are doing, it's not me. What the committee is doing to Oklahoma is ridiculous. Now they'll have a chance with the final 3 weeks of the regular season to get back in the good graces because they'll be playing the toughest competition that they've played all year. But listen, um, it does not mean that it is just that they're sitting there being ranked where they're at by the committee, which was eighth once again, by the way. I know most of the national reaction is going to be about Michigan and Michigan State, the fact that Michigan's ahead of Michigan State, despite the fact that they lost that head to head matchup. And we can talk about that some. I frankly don't care. I think both of those teams are losing again the rest of the year. You're not going to wind up with both of those teams sitting where they're at right now. I don't think they're as good as the two teams from the state of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So I don't have too much interest in what's going on with Michigan and Michigan State, to be completely honest here. And, I mean, does it shock me that the committee would rank a team ahead of another that lost the head to head? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So I'm seeing some of the comments here in the chat from Texas Tech fans already. I do want to talk about that. I've read up and listened to some of Joey McGuire, the new hire at Texas Tech, and I'm extremely impressed. It seems like look, he's already landed 3 commitments, and he brought his recruiting guy from Baylor with him. It seems very exciting. There's a lot there to like, I think, if you're a Texas Tech fan. I think it's a swinging for the fences kind of a hire, but there is a lot to like there if you're a Texas Tech fan. And, man, the TCU coaching search could not be possibly more intriguing right now. So much more interesting than I thought it was going to be. It sounded like it was going to be like Sonny Dykes, Jeff Traylor, and that was it. And now we're talking about potentially Dion Sanders, potentially Matt Campbell. Both of those are fascinating names. The list at TCU is so intriguing right now. You need to be following Drew Davison of the Fort Worth Star Telegram, who's been reporting on that every single step of the way. So definitely want to get into that. And then finally, I mean, we have more issues at Texas. I mean, poor Texas cannot take a step in any direction right now without stepping in it and having something happen. Now, in this case, I don't think it is really that bad. There is a leaked video of a Texas coach on the bus after their loss at Iowa State, where they got spanked by the Cyclones, chewing out some of the players. And to me, this one is really not that bad. And but it says something about where the program is at, and says something about what some of the issues are that are going on at Texas. The fact that the video was even leaked in the first place. So we'll talk about all that. That's kind of the outline. If you guys want to hop in the chat, I see that many of you already are. Leave me your questions or comments. I'll get to as many as I can. But if you do want to make sure that that your name gets to the top of the chat board, if you want to make sure I see your question or comment. Sorry, I'm reading a chat right now. That's why I sounded pretty weird right there. If you want to get your name and your question or comment to the top of the chat, you can donate by clicking the $sign below the chat box below where it says say something. And we have the first one here. So I see I'm going to need an explanation. I need a pronouncer on your name. It's not David, because the message says my name isn't David. That said, what happened in Name Saturday was awesome. Thanks for your coverage. I need Davad. Divad, is that what we're going with here? Divad Z. If I could just get a pronunciation, if you could spell it out phonetically for me, I'm kind of a stickler for that kind of thing. As you all have seen on my Twitter account by the Felix Andy DK Uzama shade that we've been throwing at Tim Brando for not being able to get that name right at all. So I appreciate the donation, David. I mean, Divad. Please let me know how to pronounce your name so that I can get it right. But appreciate the donation either way. And yes, it was awesome seeing Texas get drubbed like that. I went into that game, Texas and Iowa State, thinking like this is a game where like I have an inclination to root against both teams for just different biases and different tropes that I've fallen into throughout my broadcasting career, hating on both of those schools. Much more legitimate vitriol for Texas than Iowa State. It's a little more fun and just playing into the rivalry with Iowa State. But if something could have happened out of that game, one team getting pummeled by the other, particularly Texas getting pummeled, that was the more fun result to have happen there. So I do appreciate that. Okay, the rankings that came out here. Cincinnati being at number 5, for our purposes, that's going to be the thing that really sticks out. And I know that on the surface, you can say, okay, Cincinnati being moved up to number 5 is actually a sign of some respect. And in a way, I guess it is mildly surprising to me that it happened. I thought the committee might find some way to drop Cincinnati below Michigan and Michigan State, quite frankly, just because of how close of a call it was with Tulsa. But apparently the committee realized that that's the same Tulsa team that was in a dogfight with Ohio State in the fourth quarter at the Horseshoe earlier this year. But Ohio State does move into the top 4. It's Georgia, Bama, Oregon, Ohio State, Cincy. So everybody just moved up a spot. Michigan State falls from 3 to 7. So Michigan also is in that group that's up a spot, and they leave Oklahoma back at 8. Oklahoma State does move into the top 10 at number 10. So you have 2 new Big 12 schools in the top 10 of the playoff rankings. You have 3 in the top 13 and 4 in the top 14, with Baylor and BYU hanging out at 13 and 14 in those rankings. So, while yes, the committee pays some level of respect to Cincinnati by knocking them up to number 5, I'm still going with the line of disrespect here from the committee because of what is happening at the back end of the top 25, and that is a lack of American Athletic Conference teams. And this goes back to the Mike Oresco comments that I actually fully support. He was pretty staunchly against the playoff rankings and what initially came out and was sticking up for his league. And I felt for him when I heard Paul Feinbaum calling it ridiculous and yada, 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 but they couldn't get Houston and SMU into the initial rankings. Now SMU has lost again. So fair enough. I think a lot of that has to do with the speculation going on with its head coach and where he may be headed next, but I digress. They did lose, but Houston's sitting here at 8-1. They've won 8 in a row. The one loss was to Texas Tech, and that is certainly not the most embarrassing loss in the world relative to, Oregon losing to Stanford, for instance. Texas Tech is a much better team than Stanford. So it's not the worst loss in the world. They've won 8 in a row. They beat SMU. They deserve to be in the top 25. Now, UTSA finally got some love, and it felt like the committee in some ways listened to some of the criticism in bumping UTSA into the rankings at number 23. I guess they're putting a lot of stock in the fact that they beat up on UTEP, who had 6 wins and was at least okay, but it's a very much inflated record by the schedule. But, Utah and Arkansas, I can understand why they're in there. But we start getting into Pitt, Iowa, Wisconsin. I just, you have teams like that. Auburn stuck in there. Houston needed to find a way into the back end of that top 25 somehow. And instead, we're left with Arkansas, Utah, UTSA. I mean, look, nothing against UTSA and what UTSA has done this year, but do I think Houston is a better football team than UTSA? Do I think Houston would likely win a head-to-head matchup? I do. And so what the committee has done here is, again, made it harder for Cincinnati to find some upward mobility here. And really, in the end, like I said on Sunday, it probably doesn't matter much what happened against Tulsa on Saturday, as we've seen, because Cincy still moved up a spot, but also just in general, because the committee has already said, it's going to take chaos in front of you. It's going to take losses in front of you for you to get into the playoff. That didn't change regardless of what happened against Tulsa. And that hasn't really changed based on what we're seeing in the rankings right now. So it may be much to do about nothing here, but it doesn't help that now, yeah, you will not have the ammo of a top 25 win when Cincinnati does play Houston. And that sucks. And that continues to be a lack of respect for the American Athletic Conference and is just one of those subtle ways that the committee finds to prop people up or bring people down, much like we saw last week with the Mississippi State and Minnesota rankings, inexplicably at 20 and 17 respectively last week. So that is the thing that really sticks out to me about Cincinnati's plight and what's going on with Cincy right now is the fact that Houston didn't make it into the top 25. And you're still going to sit there and say that they have no opportunity for top 25 wins the rest of the way. If they beat Houston, Houston's obviously not getting into the rankings. So you're not going to see it, unfortunately, I don't think, for Cincinnati. Timothy in the chat. Appreciate the donation, Timothy. How hard do you think it will be for Houston to compete in the Big 12? They won the Southwest Conference 1 year. I assume that means 1 year after they join. I don't really know anything about the Southwest Conference history and how that would compare. I think Houston can compete. Certainly they can compete. I mean, even when Houston didn't look that impressive early in the season, they were still they outplayed Texas Tech for a half. And, Texas Tech is a middle to middle lower class Big 12 team this year. But I mean, I think that shows Houston can at least compete. And then the fact that they've ripped off 8 straight wins, they do have a head coach that has competed in the Big 12 before in Dana Holgerson. I think they'll have a shot. And I'm at least relatively encouraged by what I've seen out of Houston this year, putting together this winning streak that, I'll be honest with you. I haven't been the biggest believer in Dana Holgerson, but I definitely didn't think he would have a team that would be like tough enough to withstand that opening loss, all of the noise that was surrounding his job security at that point in time early in the year. I didn't think that Houston would be a team that would have like the wherewithal and the gumption, whatever adjective you want to throw in there, to put it together and rip off the wins that they have so far. So that's showing me something. And I think, again, a lot of this is a long-term play for Houston and the resources, and there has been some inconsistency here within the program, but they've shown on a recent enough level that they can be competitive. 2016, right, that they beat Oklahoma. I think they'll be okay. I would not, if I were a Houston fan, I wouldn't worry about like not being competitive. I don't think Houston's going to come in and win the league in the first couple of years, but I think they can definitely be competitive enough and then continue to recruit and, put some things together long term. Now, didn't get any easier with Joey McGuire, Texas high school coaching legend being hired at Texas Tech, at least as far as recruiting goes now for Houston. There's going to be a lot of competition there, and I think that's going to be fascinating. But do appreciate the donation. If you want to be like those guys and donate, click the $sign below the chat box below where it says say something. Sorry about my phone there, freaking me out. Go ahead and turn this alarm off for you all. Okay. But yeah, other than that, I'll get to some of the questions or comments here. I want to talk about Oklahoma because to me, that this week is like the most egregious thing that we're seeing in the rankings. And I know Reese Davis and crew, their reaction was basically, well, look, Oklahoma didn't play. They don't move. That's fine. Oklahoma is behind 5 one-loss teams. 5 one-loss teams are ahead of unbeaten Oklahoma. Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama. Now, do I think Oklahoma is a better football team than Alabama? No, I don't. But I've seen enough crap out of Alabama this year to at least have to hesitate there for a second because they've put together some duds themselves, like, this weekend against 4-5 LSU, or earlier in the year against 4-5 Florida, who just lost by almost 30 to South Carolina. Do I think that they are a better football team than Oregon? Yes, I do think they are a better football team than Oregon. I think if you played that game right now 10 times on a neutral field, Oklahoma's winning 6 or 7 against Oregon. But I think they're a better team than Ohio State. Probably not, but I think it could be a competitive game. Do I think they're a better team than Michigan State? Yes. Do I think they're a better team than Michigan? Yes. I absolutely do. No hesitation in my voice there at all. And so to me, that was the disappointing thing to see Oklahoma pop up at 8 here. And I know you'll say, look, John, they didn't play anybody last week. How can you move them up? I mean, we've seen the committee do all sorts of crazy things in years past, like dropping TCU from 3 to 6 in a week in which TCU won a game by almost 50 points over Iowa State, where they just absolutely whitewashed the team and then they dropped 3 spots. So we've seen it happen. Crazier things certainly have happened in the rankings. And to me, the point was what we saw out of Alabama, Oregon, Michigan State, all these teams up toward the top of the rankings that really struggled and messed around with teams that they should not have messed around with, teams that they should have taken care of business against, should have lent more leniency toward Oklahoma's resume to this point in the year, being like, hey, yes, they have some games like, for instance, against West Virginia that was probably closer than what it should have been. Kansas, that was probably closer than what it should have been. But we have other teams here in this top 25 that have been doing the same thing. Other teams that are ahead of Oklahoma that have been doing the same thing. And by the way, have a loss. I mean, that's the other part of it too. Like other teams that have a loss. We're not just talking about Oklahoma against other unbeatens. That would be one thing, but we're talking about teams that have losses. So Oklahoma is getting a real ultimate sign of disrespect being left there. And I know I even said it earlier, like that they still have these games left the rest of the year against the top 3 in the Big 12. They've still got Baylor. They've still got Iowa State. They still have Oklahoma State left on the schedule. That will be a lot of meat on the bone, and they'll have a chance to move up there. Certainly, I think in front of Michigan and Michigan State. But like where Oklahoma's at right now, I guess I should open it up to them moving in front of Cincinnati because the committee just has such a lack of respect for Cincinnati. But I don't know what Oklahoma's path. I mean, I get the logic. Like if Oklahoma wins out, they're going to be in. How could you leave that team out? Man, maybe. But I don't know the love that the committee seems to be showing for Ohio State. And then by proxy, Oregon, because of that, because again, it's the Ohio State win through Ohio State, Oregon creates its spot. I just feel like it's going to take losses in front there for Oklahoma to have a real legitimate chance. And that's the problem with holding them here at number 8 right now. And I also just think it kind of devalues the whole idea of winning games and like the value of winning games. And back to what my whole storyline has been since the initial rankings came out, like we have to put some value on actual merit and winning football games here at some point. And Oklahoma has done that. And I think when you combine it with pedigree, when you combine it with who they were last year and who they were at the end of last year, and just comparison's sake to all the other resumes that are out there, being a Power 5 football program and being unbeaten here at this point, it is certainly a sign of disrespect to have Oklahoma at number 8 where they're at. So Nathan says, and I appreciate the donation, Nathan, Utah will beat Oregon in 2 weeks. When this happens, BYU should move into the top 8 because the committee loves the Pac-12. Default BYU greater than the Pac-12. Well, yeah, I mean, someone better be sending a Pac-12 champions trophy to BYU country. And honestly, if you guys wanted a great troll move, if I were BYU, I would make up my own trophy. Be like UCF in 2017, right? Print up your own Pac-12 champs trophy like UCF claimed a national championship. I would certainly be doing that if I were BYU. Utah will beat Oregon in 2 weeks. I definitely, I mean, I have a lot of hope for that. I have a lot of hope that Utah is going to take care of the Oregon problem. I certainly was sitting there thinking during the Oregon-Washington game on Saturday, like they're probably going to survive this because Washington is just a joke and about to get rid of its coach. But they're not going to escape all of these things. And I mean, even the game this week with Washington State, I mean, that's no gimme at all for Oregon there. And then Oregon, I mean, the Civil War, Oregon State, I guess they're not calling it the Civil War anymore, right? But that game at the end of the year, that none of these games are cakewalks for Oregon. And then they'd have to go turn around and play the championship game again, potentially against Utah, right? That would likely be Utah. So there's a lot still in front of Oregon. And I certainly, if I'm an Oregon fan, I would not trust that. I would not trust Anthony Brown and company to keep on winning. So I think that one will take care of itself. It still makes me cringe and makes me pretty angry to see Oregon up there at number 3 because, again, that loss to Stanford is so bad, and there have been bad performances sprinkled in there with it, and it just is all so blatantly tied into Ohio State, which is one of my biggest sticking points with this whole process and the whole selection committee thing. But I do think it'll take care of itself. That is the team that I feel most confident in that is going to lose in front of Oklahoma. Yeah, maybe Michigan. Michigan probably belongs there too, and Michigan State still has to play Ohio State, so that's probably in the mix as well. But you get the point. I think Oregon will take care of itself. G. Thomas Holland, appreciate the donation. G. Thomas Holland was at KUK State this past weekend. Kansas legislators heard from. Okay, hang on. Kansas legislators heard from KU president. KU has a shot at joining the Big Ten in 18 months. Timeliness and thoughts. Well, if it's about the timeliness of in 18 months, I'd have to really think about that. We're talking about at that point after the Pac 12's new TV deal likely being negotiated. So maybe there's an assumption at that point in time that the dynamics, the landscape would really change at that point. Perhaps, I mean, if you believe everybody who thinks that Houston and TCU would be legitimate targets of the Pac 12, potentially something has happened then. So maybe the thought is that some other plates have shifted, so to speak, by that point in time when it happens. I look, Kansas has definitely tried to really position itself as being a legitimate contender for the Big Ten. And I've said all along, even though I poke fun at it, like I think there's a non-zero chance of it happening. I think it legitimately is something that can happen. I still don't think it's likely. And I think Kansas would like you to believe that it's likely. I can also tell you that Kansas plays in a dreadful football stadium that not only was not very full and was just a typical dump with the trough bathrooms and everything that's like straight out of like 1970, but they had porta potties for restrooms at the game. Like it's a mess. It's a disaster. I would encourage anybody from the Big Ten to go experience a game at Kansas, a football game at Memorial Stadium in Lawrence, Kansas, before they add them to the conference. Not exactly Big Ten material there. But yes, I understand that there is a possibility simply because of the basketball brand and the academics with the AAU status, although I still think that even for Kansas is a little bit overblown. I will acknowledge that. I have acknowledged that. I still don't think it's likely. And I think the KU president is certainly inclined and motivated to make it seem like it's something that can happen and make it seem like it's something that is very possible. And clearly, if you just follow the Mike Vernons of the world, who definitely are somewhat connected into the Kansas landscape, they have continued to put out this whole time. Oh, we have a shot. We have a shot. We're in the mix. We're in the mix. Obviously, it's gone even further than that, saying it's imminent at one point in time. But they very much tried to portray themselves as being legitimately viable for the Big Ten. And it serves them well to do that. It serves them well to string people along. It serves them well to drum up donations for said crappy football stadium to try and get renovations going, whatever it might be. It serves them very much to keep stringing people along like that is going to happen. So, look, and no offense, G. Thomas, but I don't know you from Adam. I don't know who you are or where you're getting this information. I'm just taking your word for it in a YouTube chat, but I'm not going to be completely dismissive of it because, again, I will acknowledge there are some things there that could make sense, but I've just yet to hear a compelling case that it will add tangible monetary value to the Big Ten. And we've been over that ad nauseum here on the channel. And then I've also yet to see something that would show me that the landscape has legitimately changed. Now, in 18 months, will it have changed? Maybe so. Very well could have been. But I think right now, it's not happening, and it would take some kind of change to make that happen. If you want to donate as well, click the $ below the chat box, the $ below where it says say something, and you can hop in here too. Let me take one last look at the rankings here. I think those are pretty much the real bones that I have to pick. Baylor, honestly, only dropped one spot in the rankings, which was a bit surprising to me. I was pleasantly surprised that Baylor hung on at 13 there. So Bears fans that have been upset with me at not respecting the Bears enough throughout the year, you got some respect out of the committee by only dropping to number 13 after the loss to TCU. So apparently the committee liked what TCU had been. Maybe you respected the win one for the Gipper thing with Patterson gone and Jerry Kill being the interim head coach. I don't know. And I still scoff some at. I get Wisconsin's been playing better football right now. I get Purdue has the big wins. I don't know. Like seeing Iowa there at number 20, I have a hard time believing that Iowa is a legitimate top 25 football team at this point, but maybe some more losses will take care of that. as the year plays out. I think we can wrap it up on the rankings there, probably. I see another question in here and appreciate the donation from MJB Set 93. MJB Set 93, do you see 18 plus team conferences happening? A logistical nightmare. I know, somebody sent me on Twitter earlier today. It was a transcript or at least some notes from what had been going on in Middle Tennessee where they're like thinking about joining the MAC, and they had listed in there some paragraph about like there are going to be 40 to 50 teams that break off or break away from everybody in college football. And so there was someone saying like, hey, look, the Big 12 needs to jump in with both feet, get to 16, form a voting block with the SEC, stop this from happening. Man, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get there anytime soon. Things seem to have slowed down a little bit now. Could I see it happening in the future? Yes, because I think where we are eventually headed to is like a college football super league that might be like 18 teams, 18 of the best teams becoming, I mean, basically the SEC almost merging into what that is. So I could see that happening. Logistical nightmare, sure, but I think you can make anything work when money's on the line. I've always scoffed a little bit at some of the people who really drum up the, how are you going to do this logistically if you add teams to get this conference to X number of teams, et cetera, et cetera. Money talks, man. If the money's right for everybody, you'll find a way, whether it's pods, whether it's divisions, whatever it needs to be. So I wouldn't sweat that part of it very much. I think it's just much more a question of like big picture. Where is this all actually headed at some point anyway? Boom to the Sooner. Appreciate the donation. Boom to the Sooner. Always in here in these live chats. Do you think a conference who just went undefeated in bowls 9 months ago should get more respect? Maybe the OU, Florida, and Iowa State, Oregon games never happened. Yeah, I mean, I think that should factor in a little bit. I'm pretty dismissive these days of bowls and the bowl system, and maybe some of that is just by nature as a K-State fan, where there have been a lot of minor bowl games played in over the last 10 years. And I've just kind of gotten tired of it, and it doesn't really mean that much to me anymore, but it doesn't really mean that much. And it is hard. Like, I get that we can look at what's happened to the Florida program right now and say, hey, maybe there were some problems there earlier, but they, that was a team that came close to winning the SEC title game. There was a level of disappointment being there. They were without some players. Like there are just so many, I'm not trying to pick on Oklahoma's win at all, but there are so many variables that go into bowl games, especially these days where you can have guys sitting out, that I have a hard time using that as something to put a bunch of stock in. But what I would say, Boom to the Sooner, is I would just say, based on teams' resumes from this season and what's actually happened here in 2021 and what we've seen comparatively from other powers and other conferences, that's what should generate the Big 12 respect. Like, go look at those composite rankings that Jeffrey Fuller puts out every single week. Like, the Big 12 has been the third best conference in the country, and it's not really particularly close. There's been a pretty big gap between the Big 12 and everybody else, and they're not like ridiculously far removed from the SEC or the Big 10 in those rankings either. And so that's what should garner more respect. I'm not saying they deserve more respect than the Big 10, more respect than the SEC, certainly not, but they deserve more respect than what they have gotten. And most of that obviously is Oklahoma. And if you want to lump Cincinnati in there a little bit with it too, you could probably do that as well. Iowa State, Oregon. I'm not familiar enough with like what Oregon's situation was there necessarily. I know Iowa State had a lot of fortune with COVID and injuries last year that helped them out quite a bit. But again, that all goes back to my larger point. There's so many variables in bowl games. How much do people really care about them? Because I have a hard time caring about it all that much as a fan and somebody that was in the media. And I don't know. You can still consider me media, whatever it is that you want. That to me is what's interesting about it. But I agree with you that the league deserves more respect. It absolutely does deserve more respect than what it's getting. And, that's nothing new. That's always been the case. Pokes fan 88. I see most shows. Thank you for the donation, Pokes fan 88. I see most shows, but maybe I missed one where you broke down what the new divisions will be in the Big 12. Love the show. Well, thank you, Pokes fan 88, for the kind words and for tuning in. I haven't really talked too much, to be honest, about divisions. This is one of those things. I think conference realignment and everything that's come along with it is pretty fascinating. I don't get real fascinated by the divisions. I don't, And one thing that I know has been reiterated by Bob Bowlesby and then Gene Taylor, who's K-State's athletic director, over and over again when I've asked is like, we're just not real worried about that right now, or we have bigger fish to fry. We'll get to that eventually. So there was one video where I kind of did what I thought would make the most logical sense. I'm thinking like Cincinnati, West Virginia. I think it was like Cincinnati, West Virginia, KU, K-State, Iowa State. Um, who am I missing? There's like one team in there, and then you'd have like the Texas schools and the Oklahomas, and obviously Houston's included in that. And then I don't remember which one UCF was in. I mean, that's kind of like a rough outline of what seemed to make some sense, at least geographically to me. But I don't know. And I have not done much digging or research to see if there are schools of thought on that right now with what's going on, because I just haven't been quite as interested in that aspect or element of it. But if I sat down, I could try and get you a better response. But honestly, there are folks on Twitter who are more into that element of conference realignment than I am, that probably have some better takes and better theories on it than I do right now. So just being completely honest with you there on that front, I don't have a tremendous answer for you on the divisions for what it would be in the new Big 12. I see Justin is saying in the chat right now, Pokes Fan 88, Big 12 East, UCF, Iowa State, Cincinnati, KU, and K State. But we're only at 5 teams there, so we're missing the 6th, right? AMAC, Big 12 has to play round robin. Are you suggesting 2 5-team divisions? I imagine that would be like right now. Oh yeah, so BYU, I see G Thomas Holland asking about BYU in there. I think I had BYU with the Texas schools. So it'd be like Houston, BYU in that division, which would be kind of like the West. And then, yeah, the East would be Cincinnati and West Virginia. But yeah, I mean, I see salt of the earth. I know like a lot of the Texas school fans would like to see the Texas schools broken up. So you would have a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of people to try and make happy with those divisions. But again, I'm just not really. I can see it in you guys in the chat. Like you guys have more interest in it than I seem to, as far as like how the divisions break down. I don't have a ton of interest in that right now. Anyway, first, like we need to make sure that these schools are going to get in 2023. I think that will happen, but I think once some of that becomes official, we may start seeing more of that. Look, guys, we have a fascinating development with the Big 12 and the coaching carousel. And I'm looking at my phone right now because I'm pulling up this article about the TCU coaching search from Drew Davison of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, who's done a great job covering this all the way. But this story actually is not even behind a paywall, which I'm sure with the headline, Coach Primetime, Dion Sanders squarely in the mix for TCU football job, source says, I'm sure there's a reason that's not behind a paywall. You're trying to build up some clicks with that one. You can understand why, but I'm just going to read a little bit from this. Dion Sanders has put himself squarely in the mix to become TCU's next coach. Source close to the university selection committee told the Star-Telegram on Tuesday. Sanders had his first interview with TCU officials on Monday and impressed. One source went as far as saying Sanders is expected to make the cut for the second round of interviews. Quote, I'm not saying he is going to get the job, not saying he's the leading candidate at this point, but he is in the mix. He was impressive. Along with Sanders, other candidates have emerged in recent days, including Iowa State's Matt Campbell, which is another thing we need to talk about here today. Louisiana's Billy Napier, SMU's Sonny Dykes, and Clemson offensive coordinator Tony Elliott. Okay. Coach Prime. The article goes on to say, it mentions LaDainian Tomlinson is a part of the selection committee for TCU here. Obviously, there's a connection there. And the reason that Dion Sanders is being so heavily considered here is because of his recruiting prowess. He signed the highest rated recruiting class in FBS and HBCU history in 2021. Rebuilt Jackson State. I didn't realize Jackson State was having as much success as they are right now under Sanders, although he's missed the last 3 games for a health issue. But that's basically the idea here. It goes on to explain like TCU is intrigued because they think that Dion Sanders will be able to get in the door of any high school recruit in the country, basically, because of who he is. Here's a quote. I don't care if you're getting recruited by Alabama or Ohio State. He's going to get in the door. And there's probably truth to that. I mean, in fact, there is truth to that, but can you actually land the guy? Can you then be organized enough to coach and have the acumen of a coach to put it all together enough? Because look, TCU can recruit talent, and I'll say that much. Like the talent element of that, I totally get how Dion Sanders would be very tempting because TCU's already been the third best recruiting school in the Big 12. 24/7 composite. I mean, they're the third most talented team in the league right now by recruiting rankings, behind, of course, Texas and Oklahoma. So if you're already doing that under Gary Patterson, a coach who would clearly kind of just lost touch with being a modern football coach by the end of it, was kind of like the guy that you would think recruits would not be too keen on playing for. You could bring in the total opposite in Dion Sanders there, already being DFW and have the resources and recent history of TCU to recruit to. Yeah, I can see exactly where that line of thinking goes. To me, that's just, I think it feels too risky for TCU to me. I would need to see much more about what exactly Dion Sanders is going to bring to the table as a head coach, as opposed to just a recruiter. Um, that's something of great concern to me if I'm hiring for TCU, and it seems like they have some other pretty good options there. Obviously, Matt Campbell apparently being one of those, but even down to Sonny Dykes, I don't know. That just seems to me to be a safer play. It would be really swinging for the fences if you go hire Dion Sanders and you're banking on the publicity and all of that really helping you out. TCU doesn't strike me as a place that needs that. So I would be very leery of that. I would not do it. But I do understand the allure. And I said this earlier today, as a neutral observer here, as somebody who does not have a dog in this fight, I don't really particularly care whether or not TCU is successful one way or the other. I don't have a problem with them, but I also am not invested in the success of their program. Would be fascinating. Would be fascinating if Dion Sanders were actually hired by TCU. So if they want to go ahead and do it, Jeremiah Donati's the AD there, right? If Jeremiah Donati wants to go ahead and do it, man, sign me up. Sign me up for watching what exactly would happen there with Coach Prime at TCU. It would be great fodder at Big 12 Media Days, like getting that sound on a regular basis from TCU. Man, what different directions Tech and TCU would be going in if they go from Matt Wells versus Gary Patterson to Dion Sanders versus Joey McGuire. Wildly, wildly different. So there are a lot of things I would really like about it, but I think TCU is in a position where they don't need to take that kind of a risk. They don't need that. So my opinion there on what's going on. And by the way, thank you for the donation, Trent. I see Trent leaving me a nice sticker. Looks like some sort of animal pumping its fists and saying hype. Thank you for that, Trent. Much appreciate the donation. If you want to be like Trent and donate, click the $ below the chat box, the $ below where it says say something. But let's talk about the Matt Campbell thing here, okay? Let's do it. I need a drink. I need a drink to discuss this one. The short answer, because I see people in here, Matt Campbell at TCU, laughing about it. BC Campbell is staying in Ames. I know Iowa State fans have laughed this idea off the face of the earth here this week. I'm not here to say, the long and short of it is, if you ask me, is Matt Campbell going to TCU? No, I don't think he is. However, he's listening. And this is something that I have done a little bit of research on, just with some connections that I have through being in the league, covering the league for 10 years. I think Matt Campbell at least picked up the phone when TCU called. He at least picked up the phone, and therefore I don't think this should be laughed off like everybody is just laughing it away, because TCU is undoubtedly a place with a higher ceiling than Iowa State. And it is a place that, if their pockets are going to get deep enough, certainly would have the resources to outmatch Iowa State and what they could pay Matt Campbell. So if you're talking about a guy who could really elevate what he's doing right now at a point where, here's the other thing to remember, Cyclone fans, look at everything that's going to be lost off of the roster this year. Like, if there's a time to move and a time to jump when your star is still pretty bright and you wouldn't have to endure a potential rebuilding season, it would be now. I mean, Iowa State had all these seniors come back from last year's team to make this big push and this big run this year. This is the roster jumping off point if you wanted to go to a different slash better job. So you could get the bigger payday potentially at TCU, and you'd be going to a place that, as I just mentioned, has already, under Gary Patterson, a kind of washed up, out of touch coach. They were already recruiting at a level that was third best in the Big 12 behind Texas and Oklahoma. So that proves how much better you could recruit there. Matt Campbell, to me, it feels like is just bumped up against his ceiling at Iowa State, which is going to be 9-3, and most of the time more like 7-5 or 8-4. Still means he's a very good coach. I don't think quite elite level, like people really hold him in that sort of regard. So you've hit your ceiling at Iowa State. You're about to lose this monster senior class and be staring down the barrel of a rebuild year. You could go get a huge payday at a place that is proven that you can recruit at a high level, even if you're not as young and charismatic as Matt Campbell is as a head coach. That's the sell here. Like Raging Cyclone, why would he make a lateral move? I hate to break it to you, that is not a lateral move. TCU is undoubtedly a better job than Iowa State. I'm sorry, but that is the reality. Much like I would say the same thing about my school, Kansas State. I mean, it's a way better job because DFW is there, because they've already proven that they can recruit at a high level. Again, I will reiterate, they have been the third best recruiting school in the Big 12, so they would stand to be the best recruiting school in the new Big 12, the easiest place to recruit in the new Big 12. DFW makes a massive difference. Their recent success. I mean, you might look at me, Raging Cyclone, and say, well, Iowa State's been the better team like the last 2 years. Okay, but let's take a wider swath here of the last 10 or since TCU joined the Big 12. Like, they've proven that they can get into it. They were at number 3 in the college football playoff rankings once upon a time. The ceiling is much higher at TCU. It is definitively a better job. And everything I've been hearing since the TCU job came open is that, like, people in the industry and in the coaching profession and in athletic director circles, athletic department circles, TCU's viewed as a very good job. So I don't think it deserves to be laughed away. The Matt Campbell at TCU stuff does not deserve to be laughed away. It may just wind up in another raise and more money for assistants, which even just happened this past offseason to Iowa State, and it's going to get even more expensive for the Clones. I don't think he would end up taking it in the end. But I think a big part of that is honestly just because he would then have to be facing Iowa State every single year in the conference. And Campbell strikes me, obviously, as a very loyal guy and somebody who doesn't want to deal with that or do that to somebody and do that to people that have been really, really good to him. And look, so again, I don't think he winds up doing it, but he is listening. That is sourced. Like, I will tell you that. Like, he did not hang up the phone. And look at his press conference the other day. That was not a denial. Iowa State fans, he didn't deny it. Let me see. I can try and pull up that quote. I'm probably just going to have to scroll through my timeline here would be the fastest way to find it. But it was certainly not the, was it like Mike Tomlin had that great denial there where he was like, I'm not going to go back to coaching in college football. I'm not going to find this, am I? I must have just liked the tweet and not actually hit it. But it was not a straight up denial from Campbell when he got asked about it. And so I see T. Luft, who I'm imagining is an Iowa State fan, saying, sorry, Campbell will continue to recruit KSU candidates and beat KSU. If he stays at Iowa State, he probably will. I'm not denying that. And none of this is like my fandom coming out here and trying to rib Iowa State fans with this. It is just the reality. Yes, Iowa State is in a better position than K-State right now. I would maybe be careful with your words a little bit about next year, T. Luft, and what's going to happen to your Cyclones next year, because I do think that there's going to be a dip. But look, and like Derek, I see in here, your dislike for Iowa State always makes me laugh. Guys, like, saying that TCU is a definitively better job than Iowa State and that the timing for Matt Campbell to be looking for a job here would make some sense, and that if TCU has deep enough pockets here to go to a place that can recruit better than anywhere else in the new look Big 12 is like a ridiculous notion and a laughable notion. You are letting your fandom stand in the way if that's going to be your take on it. Say all you want about me and Iowa State, but that is a real legitimate point. It's being reported by real legitimate people outside of me. Whatever trust you have in people I've been talking to behind the scenes would also tell you that this at least is not something that deserves to be laughed about. So I hate to break it to you. And Cyclone fans, you should be very proud about your program and where it's at right now. You smacked K-State 2 years in a row. Absolutely. You definitely recruit better than K-State right now. And I'm not going to, that is one area, if you really want to get after me, like, I'm very, very disappointed in what K-State's recruiting has been and the lack of progress there. I will admit all of those things and still tell you at the end of the day, like, anybody with a reasonable brain is going to say TCU is a much better job than Iowa State. I mean, TCU might be the best job in the new look Big 12. I'm trying to rack my brain about that right now, but I think the vibe that I've gotten since the TCU job came open is that people feel like TCU would be the best job in the new look Big 12. Again, Dallas Fort Worth, recent success there, and mainly DFW, as Nathan mentions, being located in DFW helps keep those pockets deep in terms of recruiting. Mainly DFW. So does that go back to the typical whole argument of realignment where so much of it is just being geographically lucky? Absolutely. For sure it does. But that is the reality of the situation. BC, that's a poor excuse. You better take a look at Campbell's recruiting class. Your point is weak. Dude, BC, I mean, we can take one Matt Campbell recruiting class, and I will go look at it here in a second. But I guarantee you, over the last, TCU has recruited in the 24/7 composite as the third best school in the Big 12 over a long period of time. You're talking about a flash in the pan 1-year class here at the end. He would undoubtedly recruit better in Fort Worth with TCU's resources behind him. I'm sorry, that's just a reality, and that will always be the reality for K-State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State too. I mean, any school that is going to be in that same kind of target area. So I need to stop getting sidetracked by this. I know a lot of you probably don't care as much about the Matt Campbell stuff as the Iowa State fans that are getting after me here in the chat. Iowa's team. Well, I'll do 24/7 composite. 24/7 composite recruiting rankings 2022. So we'll see what 2022 says. 2022, Iowa State checks in at number 27, which is great, ahead of Oklahoma State. I don't think I've seen TCU yet. So this class Gary Patterson had must not have been much. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even seeing TCU here. So you're certainly right in 2022, like number 27. Really nice class for Iowa State. Now let's go look at 2021. 2021. Well, now I'm not seeing either or. 2020. 2020, TCU had the number 23 recruiting class in the country. They signed a 5-star recruit. That's never going to happen at Iowa State with Matt Campbell. I'm sorry. You're not going to be bringing a 5-star recruit into the fray there. This class was behind Oklahoma at 12 and behind Texas at 8. It was the third best recruiting class in the Big 12. 2019, Texas at 3, Oklahoma at 6. TCU again is third in the league at number 31. Iowa State's down at 46. So, I mean, look, like Gary Patterson, again, on his last legs, consistently was out recruiting Iowa State. I'm sorry, but that is just the reality. Don't laugh it away. But let me say this before we close the chat, and I again apologize for getting too bogged down on that point there. But Joey McGuire at Texas Tech, actually, I got to get to the Texas thing too. But Joey McGuire at Texas Tech, that seems to me to be a really, really nice hire. Just like kind of outside of the box, imaginative, a lot of energy being pumped in. Clearly, he's an energetic guy. I still think to me, it is definitely a swing for the fences kind of hire. To me, that's one that will either wildly succeed or definitely fail, because 6 years ago the guy was a high school head coach in Texas, but a high school coaching legend in the state of Texas. He's going to be able to get into any conversation for any recruit in the state of Texas because of those connections. He's already proven. I mean, he landed 3 recruits before he even had the ink had dried on the contract at Tech. And he brought his main recruiting guy with him from Baylor, which I know was viewed as a huge win already for Texas Tech. So I think there's a lot to like there. If he can get good enough coordinators, I think with a hire like that, relationship builder, recruiter, the key is going to be can you get good enough X and O guys as coordinators to work with you? If the answer is going to be yes on that, I think there is a world of upside there for Texas Tech. He's talking about playing defense now, talking about it and being about it. Those are 2 different things at Texas Tech. But I really wondered in this process, are they, Sonny Dykes kept getting brought up as okay, are you just going to go into this Cliff Kingsbury mode again and try and get a guy just that's going to play offense? No, I mean, I think there's enough reason to believe this could be a pretty well-rounded head coach. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that he could really up the recruiting at Texas Tech. I 100% get the optimism. Easy guy to buy into. And also somebody that definitely, he said he's going to die at Texas Tech, right? So he's certainly talking a big game about being a guy that will be there for the long haul. And being someone from the state of Texas, you can certainly believe that. So that, again, that's extra incentive. I've said this before, when K-State was making a hire, I didn't like the line of thinking oh, you need to make sure you get someone that's going to be around for a long time. Now, if he comes in and elevates your job enough to where he's able to jump to a better job, then you did your job and your program's in a better spot. So I'm never going to use that as the criteria for why you should hire a coach, but that's certainly a positive. If he checks other boxes, and then another one is he really wants to be here and he can be here long-term, that's just an extra benefit. So I see it all. I very much get it. I very much get why there was so much hype and excitement for Joey McGuire there coming in at Tech. And it's certainly, especially when it was Matt Wells, it was just very milquetoast, just not exciting, not intriguing, and just pretty average at best as a head coach. I think every reason to be thrilled about this if you are Texas Tech. Doesn't mean that it's going to work, but the plan, the upside is certainly there, and I certainly buy it and see it. So I'm excited for you, Texas Tech fans. I'm excited for you. Happy for you. Coaching searches can be really stressful and really frustrating, and it seems like about the best case scenario worked out there for Texas Tech. Maybe some would say Sonny Cumbie would have been, or I'm sorry, not Sonny Cumbie, but Sonny Dykes would have been best case scenario there as your head coach. But I don't know, man. I like taking the swing at Joey McGuire there. So happy for you and intrigued and excited to see what Joey McGuire is able to do in the Big 12. Now, finally, we have this Texas story that has come up here, and let me pull up my Twitter DMs because I had lots of people DMing me about this. It was Bo Davis was the guy's name. So Texas defensive line coach Bo Davis. There's a video that leaked of him just ripping into Texas players on their team bus after the game in Ames. And I would love to know the origin of the video, where it came from. And, he said, look, some of you guys need to hop in the transfer portal if you're not ready. I'm paraphrasing here, but if you're not going to be on board with us, if you're going to let me continue to get my bleep kicked like that was embarrassing. If you keep doing that, you need to hit the transfer portal. A lot of people seem to take some offense to that. I don't know. To me, it just seemed like very typical coach speak, things that I would expect are said all of the time by coaches. And frankly, Texas has a roster full of guys that probably need to hear that and need some of that pumped into them. So to me, it was kind of just a non-issue. But what it serves to do for Texas is get them into the headlines again and create another distraction. And that's the part that would really bother me if I'm a Texas fan, is it's just more negative press, more negative headlines. We laugh about the monkey thing, but then there's Joshua Moore. There was the fight last week. Now he's off the team. Yet another debilitating loss in between this, a 4-game losing streak. there's just noise. There's constant noise going on. And if there is a player or somebody on that team disgruntled enough to be leaking that video in the middle of this season, that to me like kind of is like a symptom of the disease, right? And tells me that you have some really big problems in the locker room. And so that's the problem for Texas, is that it is clear that there are major issues when things like that are getting out. I don't think Bo Davis like should be in any kind of trouble, or that should be anything that is really an indictment in and of itself of the program. But the problem is that there are clearly more underlying issues that led to that video even getting out there in the first place. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely, I, I don't even know that I laugh, because to me, again, that's just like a coach being a coach. So it's not one of those where I laugh and say like, haha, Texas. I shrug my shoulders a bit, but also I know in the back of my mind, like this is another thing that Sark just doesn't need to deal with. And it's another thing that kind of comes along with being involved at Texas and being the Texas head coach. Like things like that will get more attention than if it were a Kansas State coach, where the video leaked out of him saying that. It's going to get more attention because you are at Texas, and that's a part of what makes this job more difficult, and you have a lot of other things to manage while also trying to change the image of this thing as being a country club program. I go back to that too, a coach like seemingly questioning the toughness of his team. You always think of Texas being a country club program. That's a hard thing to change. It's a hard thing to shift out of. And now you're seeing just signs of that being all over the place here. Just over halfway through, 2/3 of the way through the college football season and the first season for Steve Sarkisian. I see John, Texas will regret firing Herman for years. Yeah, I don't know that it's all about Tom Herman. They might regret firing Tom Herman, but I think it was more about like the timing of when they fired him and who was available, and only being able to get Sark. I think it's more about Sark. I just didn't think ever he was really the guy to turn this around. And I still obviously don't right now. And I think that's the bigger deal. I think if there was somebody, like if they, they thought they were going to get Urban Meyer, right? A faction of the fans, if they really could have landed Urban Meyer, then okay, I don't think you would have regretted firing Tom Herman. I don't think Tom Herman was ever going to be what Texas really wanted him to be, but he may have been a guy to keep the program at 8 or 9 wins more consistently. Which would just ultimately would never satisfy Texas fans anyway, especially as they move to the SEC. So I think with Herman, some of that was just going to be inevitable anyway. The problem is who it was that you actually hired to replace him. Matthew, appreciate the donation. This will wrap things up, unless if you have something you want to get in the next minute or two, hit the $ below the chat box to donate. But Matthew, going to wrap us up here by saying Tech is a better job than TCU, way more passion in the fan base, and actually Tech has more social pull in DFW. And TCU was 6 times the alumni. Well, so here's the thing, Matthew. I respect your take and your opinion as to Tech being a better job than TCU. I certainly respect the idea that Tech could have more social pull in DFW because of having more alumni, because TCU is just such a small school. But the problem here is where the schools are located. And so recruiting a kid to go play in DFW is a wildly different thing than recruiting them to go play in Lubbock. And that is not me. I've said many a time, I think Lubbock gets a bad rep because people assume that it's a crappy place just because it's far away and hard to get to. It's not at all. In fact, I enjoy Lubbock, but it is hard to get to. And it's not in just a massive media market like TCU is in DFW. So you're closer proximity wise to so much talent there. If you're talking about a kid that's from a bigger city and wanting to maintain that kind of a lifestyle and environment, that's the kicker here. And that's the real issue. So also I think just the last 10, 20 years of college football being played at both of those places would tell you that the ceiling, at least right now, is higher at TCU than it is at Texas Tech. So I would respectfully disagree with you on that. But I do understand the point that you're making about more social pull in Dallas. And I would not pretend for a second to be ingratiated enough in Texas and in Dallas and DFW to know what the dynamics of that are really like. So I'll take your word for it because I can see the enrollment numbers. I mean, I can see the enrollment numbers and how that is absolutely possible because TCU is so small and Texas Tech is pretty damn big. T Christian 74, Last one here. Thanks for the donation, T Christian 74. Appreciate your channel. Good luck to K-State the remainder of the year. Yes, and I'm gonna guess. So T Christian, you're probably a TCU fan, right? Best of luck to the Frogs the rest of the year as well, if that is indeed your team. All right, excuse me. Fun chat here tonight. Thanks for hanging out. I like the Tuesday. I like the reaction show to the rankings. I like when we have very exciting and interesting things happening coaching wise in the Big 12 as well. So appreciate you guys. Definitely we'll be back at it on Sunday. I'll try and get you some content. Well, you'll definitely have my picks between now and then, and I'll try and get you an extra video or two on the channel before then as well. So take care. Spread the word about the channel. Follow me on Twitter at JL Kurtz. Spread the word about the channel if you have friends that love Big 12 football, love college football, and you think they'd be interested in this. Please tell them about the channel, and we'll keep it rolling. Okay, T Christian 74 Cyclones. There you go. Best of luck. Best of luck to the Clones. Best of luck to the Clones the rest of the year. All right. Take care, guys. We'll talk soon.